you face this bodily response of fear, excitement, so many different things. And you can't just say, oh, you know what? I'm going to process this later. I'm going to think about this later. I'm going to take this to my holy hour later. No, it's like you're afraid that pitch is coming. You have no choice but to respond. You have to respond. And that's a very, very physical but spiritual. So many things are within that.
Welcome to the In Spirit podcast from Amoris Christi. Join us as we explore current events and all manner of fascinating topics and explore their connections to Christian living.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the In Spirit podcast. It's a joy and privilege today to have two good friends of mine, Geoffrey Merz and McKay. Welcome guys, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us. Yeah, this is really a beautiful opportunity to be here. First time that I've really been in this kind of environment, being here in a podcast situation. So I think it's going to be a great episode.
I'm excited. I'm excited for you guys. Jeffrey, welcome.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here also. Some fellow sports
enthusiasts.
Athletes here,
teammates in different ways.
That, exactly. And so that's what we wanted to talk about today a little bit. Our episode is about sports. And Dylan's a seminarian studying for the Diocese of Palm Beach. He graduated from Palm Beach Atlantic studying exercise science, and during college played tennis as well as an avid runner, has completed marathons, 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, you name it, what have it. Yes. And then Geoffrey here is the director of student life here at School of Nazareth, the program here at Amoris Christi. And I think there's any sport that I know, not only does Geoffrey play, he's good at it too. So soccer, basketball, he's my golf mentor too. So I've been learning golf from him. But I wanted to ask you, Geoffrey, which sport do you think you're best at?
I think probably soccer.
Yeah.
Soccer was the one I started the youngest, probably like age 5, and I played it up until now. So soccer,
So I played with you guys on so many sports, and I've played against you some of the times too. And I've got the wrath from some of the times from both of you guys. And so, but it's a joy to be here, guys. And thanks for being here. And so we just want to talk a little bit about sports. And so what do you guys love about sports? Dylan, what do you love about sports?
Yeah, I think this is a really great question. I would say what I love the most about sports is, how sports is really a form of play. Sports has a sort of aspect of playfulness to it. And we kind of know that from just the question that we ask to people, like, what sport do you play? Right? There's a playfulness in the sport. And I play sports not just to exercise, although, obviously it's a great form of exercise, but sports really it involves a sort of childlike playfulness to it. And I think all the rules and the regulations of sports all come together to bring about the joy of sport, and that it's this form of play.
Yeah.
And it's this really healthy form of leisure, which brings a lot of joy to me. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Geoffrey? What do you love about sports?
Yeah, hearing that question, I think about, like, if you were to ask that to a kid, what do you love about sports? They would say, well, what I love about sports is sports. It's like you almost can't even answer the question.
Yeah.
Because sports is something that's so, you're just like Dylan was saying, you're playing, you're in it. It's you could put concepts on it, but I think part of what makes sports so beautiful is that it's something that you just are doing and you're in it. And I could say now, looking back on it, I think creativity is one thing I love about sports, especially when it's soccer. The ball is coming to you in a different angle that you never experienced before, and you hit a pass or a shot, and your team does something together. Like that freedom that you experience when you're playing, where like the ball is with you, you're passing it, you have control over it, but you also have no idea where it's going to go.
Yeah.
I love that. But
I think, that's beautiful. I think that entering into play and the joy that we experience and the beauty that we experience in that, I think that's what, I think for me, that's what I love about sports. And how did you guys why did you, when I think of my childhood, I think, why do you play sports? You play sports because you love it, like you were saying, right? But I think, over the years, then it becomes like, I'm playing sports because I want to be healthy, or I want to, improve my body or something like that. But has sports really taught you anything about your attitude towards your body, or how do you guys kind of see that?
Yeah, I think that for me, You know, it's interesting because, you know, when you think about sports and the way that it has such an influence on society and on culture, you're right in that it can be very much sports can turn one inwardly into themselves. And sort of it's about what I can produce, my performance, how I'm, playing the sport in front of others, how well I'm performing. And along with all the practice, all the training, and all that goes into playing a sport, it can be very much something that almost turns our body into machines. And I think in some sense that can be a danger of sports, in that we're now only looked at for our performance and what we can do, and we're looked at as machines just producing something. But for me, when I look at sports from the Christian perspective especially, and it's something that I think the Christian faith sheds a lot of light on how the body is very much to be respected, and the dignity of the body when it comes to sports. In that, for me personally, it helps me when I'm playing sports, it helps me to appreciate who it is that I am. Not only the fact that I have a body, but that I am a body. Yeah. And so how sports communicates something beautiful about creation, about God has designed me in this way. God has created me in this particular way, filled with all these gifts and talents. And so for me, sports allows me to enter into this place of gratitude and thanksgiving.
Oh, wow.
Gratitude and thanksgiving for the gifts and talents that God has given to me, these athletic abilities, and then ultimately using those gifts and talents for the advancement of his greater glory.
Yeah, and even giving thanks for your own human body, right?
Exactly.
And we're not like pure spiritual beings. We're like body and soul. And I think we can't separate them either. I think that's the beauty of it. Like, as we're doing activities of the human body, we're doing activities of the human soul. And really, you know, that's what in a way, that's what the incarnation is. We encounter Jesus in his flesh. And when we encounter Jesus in his flesh, we encounter the divine person as well. We can't separate the both as well. So I think that's a great point that you bring about like the Christianity, why it's so invested in sports and why it's interested in sports, because it is a human activity. And any human activity involves our body, involves our souls, and we're able to encounter the beauty of that. Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah.
Definitely.
Jeffrey, any thoughts on your encounter with your attitude towards the human body as well?
Yeah, I think back to an experience playing baseball when I think I was about 10 years old, and I was maybe 4'4", and there was this guy on the other team that he must have been 7 feet tall. It was like David and Goliath, and this guy, he threw the ball 70 miles an hour, and he was like 12. He was like the oldest kid in like it was like 5th to 6th grade. I was on the lower end. He was on the higher end. And I was this, small kid, played shortstop. And this guy was massive. And I was the first hitter for our team. So I get up there. And if you've played baseball, you know there's the box. And that box, you have to stand within that box to be able to hit the ball at the plate. Yeah. And you can't be outside of the box. So I'm in the back corner, like both feet together. I'm as far away from the plate because I don't want to get hit by this guy because he's throwing 70 miles an hour. Most kids at that age are throwing like 40 miles an hour. And I remember that because it's that experience of the body where you face fear. You face the terror of, I don't want to get hit by this guy.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to, I'm like, he could kill me. But the interesting thing with sports is that you have to engage with that fear. You have to engage with what I know is about, okay, my body's smaller, but I know I'm fast. This guy's really big and strong. So how can I approach that? So I remember it was literally the first pitch. He throws it as hard as he can and drills me right in the back.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And that baseball seam, it literally left a mark on my back. So I'm like,
yep, I'm not playing baseball anymore. Yep,
so I'm like holding back tears as I run to first base. And my dad's, there, he's one of the coaches. He's just cheering me on, like, stay with it. And I'm like in such a trance that they like throw over to pick me off at first base. And then I run to second and I get this like stolen base. And I remember being so excited. Yeah. But for me, there's been so many moments for myself and also witnessing in others where you face this bodily response of fear, excitement, so many different things. And you can't just say, oh, you know what? I'm going to process this later. I'm going to think about this later. I'm going to take this to my holy hour later. No, it's like you're afraid that pitch is coming. You have no choice but to respond. You have to respond. And that's a very, very physical but spiritual. So many things are within that.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I never really thought about that, how sports forces you to engage with your emotions, what you're going through in life. And really, you have to engage with it. There's no other choice. And so that's a great point, man. Thanks for bringing that.
I'm sure you've seen that with soccer, going against a team that is just crazy good. Tennis.
For sure.
Guy is serving the ball 100 miles an hour. Like,
Yeah, there's no running away. You can't hide in your room. You have to face it. So that's a great point.
I think that's such a crucial part when it comes to sports, especially, is the fact that it always calls one to come face to face with challenge, right? And so sports involves courage to play a sport, to go against the competition that's in front of you, to play this sport according to the rules and the regulations, and to do it well. Like, this is all part of the courage that's required to put yourself out there and face the competition, like David and Goliath kind of thing in the Bible. So
that's a great point,
I love
man.
it,
Yeah, I do, like, Dylan, you brought up the topic of rules. And I do want to touch upon that because many times in life or in general, like the culture, society can show us how rules can be restricting.
Sure.
But, it can stifle our freedom in a way. But how have you guys encountered, how do you kind of approach freedom or freedom and rules in sports?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you ever watched, ESPN top 10 plays, you can look back. I remember as a kid watching that, waiting for that 12 o'clock hour, whenever it was, for the top 10 plays. And every single one of the top 10 plays had to do with some baseball player reaching over the fence to pull the home run back, or the NFL player catching the ball just on the out of bounds, the basketball player making the shot with 1 second left. So you see, like, all the most exceptional plays, the things that we love about sports, they're almost always happening, like, right at that boundary, right at that place where, because if you don't have that rule that there's a shot clock and time ends, or you don't have a rule there's an out of bounds, the game becomes meaningless. Yeah. And not only meaningless, it's boring.
It's boring, yeah.
And there's no way to really showcase really your skill, really your ability. What you see in these top plays, the most exciting plays, they always have to do with relating to that rule, relating to that boundary. They're not avoiding it. They know that at that point, something amazing can happen.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's beautiful. Yeah, I think a lot of people can think about rules and regulations as something that kind of inhibits one's freedom or stops creativity. But really, it's the exact opposite. I mean, if you think about some kids that are on the playground or something like that, and they're all gathered together and they want to create a new game of some sort. They want to play something with one another. And so they're making, they're trying to think through these ideas of how it is that we're going to play this game. And part of creating a game is making rules, right? Because if there is no rules, then it's just complete chaos. And I think it was great that Geoffrey said, like, if there's no rules, then the game is boring. The sport is boring. And so it's actually within those rules and regulations that it calls one to be more creative within those boundaries, to be more creative in those rules. And I don't know.
Yeah. I think like as you're sharing that, it's actually precisely in the rules that we experience the most freedom.
Exactly.
Right. And I think, when we look at the Christian life too, it's precisely within whether it's liturgy, whether it's the 10 Commandments, whether it's a beatitude, it's precisely in following that we experience most freedom in a way. And so I think that's the beauty of, like, sports and the Christian life as well, is that, it's precisely within the rules that, we experience most freedom. And really the laws and the rules are meant for us to encounter the beauty of the sport, right?
Yeah.
If we, like you guys were sharing, if there was no rules, it would actually be chaos. And I think it's the same thing in Christian life. If there is no morality, it would be chaos. If there is no rubrics in the liturgy, it would be chaos. We wouldn't be actually able to encounter the beauty of the liturgy, the beauty of the Christian life, So yeah, that's a great point. I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so you guys have played sports. I know, Geoffrey, you've been played sports at different, I would say, like different stages of your life, also at different places. I would say, Geoffrey, you probably played abroad too during your year at Senegal, and Dylan, I'm sure at college, you played with college athletes, and that now you're here at seminary, and then you've trained for marathons. And so, how do you guys kind of see that the role that sports plays in those interactions with those different people in a way, no matter where they're coming from? You guys have any thoughts on that, or what the role sports can play?
Yeah, I think for me, I had the chance to travel a bit after high school and going to South America and Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador.
Oh, wow.
And then I went to North India. And then in college, I went to Senegal in West Africa. And all those places, soccer was a very popular sport. And it's one of like the easiest sports to play. It wasn't even always with a ball. Sometimes it was, like duct tape rolled up together. But in most of those places, I didn't really speak Spanish that well. I didn't speak much Hindi at all. And then in Senegal, it's French, but also Wolof, a few different languages. But there's a different language, which is the language of soccer. And in that sport,
common language right there.
Common language. And you don't have to say a word. You just make sounds. You can go, ha! And they know exactly that means, why aren't you passing me the ball? You can point, so you use this. It's definitely a way of communicating, because when you pass the ball with other players and you get on the same page, in fact, I say probably my most beautiful point of connection was actually playing in Florida around here, and I was playing in this league, and there's a guy from Latin America, and he just joined our team for that game. I didn't know his name. I didn't know anything about him. It was his first time playing, but we just linked up on the field, and I had a couple assists to him. He scored a few times, and the game ended, and we're both just hugging each other, and I'm just like, what is your name? We knew nothing about each other. I didn't even know his name. And he's just like, Adrian. And I was like, nice to meet you, man. Wow. And I think I never saw him again.
That's amazing.
But there was like something that we shared in that moment that would never come about through any kind of conversation.
Yeah.
Or, it's something that in that sport, there's a connection that comes about that.
Yeah. Like sports just has this incredible ability to bring people together.
Yeah.
I'm always so amazed that when I go to sporting events, basketball games, baseball games, go to tennis matches, things like that, especially in the realm of professional athletics and professional sports, the amount of people that come together to watch their team, to watch a specific player is quite remarkable. Yeah. And they're coming from all these different cultures, all these different backgrounds, different ages, and things like that. And it's really beautiful to see the unifying aspect of sports in that way. And that's something that I experienced in college, especially. Going from with tennis, I started playing tennis in high school, actually. And the difference between going from high school to college is really quite extraordinary. There's a lot of differences when it goes from those two levels, for sure. But one of them especially is the fact that the sport becomes so much more diverse. That once you come to college and you decide that you want to play for a sports team, whatever it is in the collegiate level, you're going to meet people from all kinds of places, coming from all different countries. And I remember playing tennis at the university that I was playing at here in Florida. And I think it was me and maybe one or two other guys that were from the United States. The rest of these guys are coming from different European countries. And I think it really adds to the competition, which is another aspect to it, that when you broaden the the amount of people when it comes to the actual sport that are able to participate, well, the competition immediately goes up in that way. And so that was also another difference that I saw going from high school to college was the level of competition.
Yeah, I think you guys both bring up some great points, and we'll try to touch on them a little bit. I think one, Geoffrey, that you brought up was sports as, in a way, helping us grow in brotherhood. And I think, and I think that's the beauty of it. I think that's the beauty of maybe it's play. That, when you enter into play with another person, like, you don't need to know their name. You don't need to know where they're from. It doesn't matter how old they are, what country they're from, and at that playing field, you're brothers, and in that moment, when you enter into play with them, they're equal. They're, there's no separation between them, and you experience that beauty of that love between you guys. And I think that's really the beauty. And in a way, like, the Christian life is, for Christianity, we believe that all men are created in the image and likeness of God, right? And I think, that sports brings out that really beautifully, I could say, right? Yeah. Like, I think, like, no matter where you're from, what country you are, you're all equal on that playing field. It doesn't matter if you're Federer's kid or, it doesn't matter where you're from on that playing field. You guys are equal. And I think so I think the image of us being equal, created in the image and likeness of God, of being equal in dignity, is really brought out.
There's a dignity or dignify, I don't know what the word be, but there's a certain experience of dignity, I think, that comes through sport, because, like you're saying, it's not about necessarily where you came from or your background. So many of the best soccer players or best football players, basketball players, a lot of them, they're not coming from the best backgrounds. Like Sadio Mane, this amazing soccer player. He came from the south of Senegal, from basically no opportunity. He got picked out by some scout and goes on to become one of the best soccer players in the world. Or you look at so many players in the NFL or the NBA where they're coming from any different background. But when they make it to the top and they're on these top teams, it's not like, well, you're not going to be starting today because you didn't have a good enough education. It's like, no, you're the best player. We're putting you in the game. Doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter what language you speak. If you are not just a good player, but a player that plays well with other people and uplifts the team, you're in.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the unifying aspect for sure.
Yeah, I think that brings a lot of hope to people also. Like, when you think about that, the part of hope that is present in sports, you look at these examples of athletes who are coming from various financial backgrounds, and athletes who grew up with not many resources and money growing up playing the sport, and in tough family situations or whatnot. And you see how they're just devoted to their athletics, they're devoted to their sport, and they've obviously been given this gift and this talent by God to play the sport. And I think it brings a lot of hope to young people, especially, who they might see their situation and they might have the difficulties in their house. They might see that they're growing up in poor situations. But, when you look at the influence and the impact of sport, it has such a way of being able to capture people no matter where they're coming from. No matter what financial situation they're in, what difficulties or problems they're in, they can experience the love of the sport, right? And I think that relates so well to the Christian life. It relates so well to the Christian life because the hope is that no matter what it is that we are going through as Christians, the sufferings and the pains that we are experiencing, we can experience the joy of having a relationship with God, right? We can experience that joy no matter what, and that's where that hope is. And obviously, our hope is set on heaven, and the Lord has come to save all people, and that's the hope. Is that that all people from all places and all backgrounds, all nations, can come to experience the love of God and come to enter into heaven, be in union with God. So there's that connection there present with the sports and relationship with God.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, guys. Dylan, you brought up another point, and I just wanted to expand on that a little bit more because I know both of you guys are pretty competitive. Playing with both of you guys.
Not really.
I think I've seen you guys like how competitive.
I'm not going to deny that.
I think Anthony. I think you're probably the most competitive.
Yeah, right.
Okay, all of us are competitive in different ways. Okay,
Sure.
But I've always thought about this, right? Like, why are we? What does that competition? What does that bring out in us? Like sometimes at the end of a game, I feel horrible after losing, and I think like, why did I react that way? But it's out of competition. Obviously, you don't want to lose. But have you guys thought about that, of how you understand competition and what that kind of reveals about the human person? And yeah,
go ahead, Geoffrey.
Well, it's an interesting question.
The first competitor. Well, go ahead.
I'm not very competitive. And, anybody who's watching this will know that. I think it's probably a gene passed down from my dad, who's very competitive in the most quiet of ways. You never think it until you're playing like ping pong at home, and he just starts asking you about your day and trash talking you. And you find out it was all just to get you distracted. Like, my dad was
part of his plan.
He's like king of the mind games, hitting the ball. He knew exactly the spin. Competition. I think so many ways to, like, when you're competing, at least in my experience, it's almost not even about this reward at the end, or like those things are all good, but like when you're in the heart of the game and you're going up against a defender, like maybe in all different examples, but let's say it's in soccer and you have the ball and you're trying to beat this guy. You're not thinking about, if I beat this guy, we're gonna win the championship, and then because of that I'm gonna be seen as this person. In that moment you have this opportunity to show everything that you have and put it all out there to get past this guy and to advance your team to winning that game, to scoring the goal. So I think when it comes to competition, like you can show and find your deepest potential, because, and you probably experience this, playing against a really bad opponent, you don't even want to be competitive. Like, if we're playing a soccer game against a really bad team, you're not going to go out and beat them 20-0.
Yeah.
Within 10 minutes, you're going to get bored. But when you're playing against a really strong opponent, they bring something extra out of you. So that competitiveness, it's like you need it to reach your highest potential.
Yeah.
Without it, you won't even be able to know what you can do.
Yeah.
A bad opponent they're not going to bring the full potential out of you, because you're always going to you always play down to the competition.
Exactly.
That's kind of this famous line in sports, right?
Yeah.
So you play against a good team, they raise you up, and then you compete with each other, and you see beautiful plays happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I experience that all quite too often when I'm playing Anthony on the ping pong table at the seminary.
No, but Dylan, I wanted to ask you as well, because I know Geoffrey and me both play a lot of team sports, and I think in the team sports, it is a little different, because you have other teammates with you, and in a way there's a sharing of the sadness, or the sharing of the joys. But many times I think, I always think about this with tennis players, it's a lonely place. You're alone in that box. And so, like, how do you kind of see that competition, or even running too? You're by yourself, in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at the difference between team sports and more individual sports. What I will say also, though, is that even when it came with tennis, and I played a little bit of doubles in high school, so there's that kind of teamwork aspect there with having a partner. But definitely played a lot more singles when it came to tennis. But even in that case, you're still on a team, that you're playing singles and you're going against your competition on the other side of the court, but you're playing this match for the sake of the team in total. Your high school team, or for me it was my college team as well. So you're always kind of working towards the good of something greater beyond yourself, which is the team. But yes, if you're just speaking about the competition that's on the other side of the court when it comes to singles, you end up you end up really almost competing with yourself. When you look at these individual sports, the competition certainly is against your opponent that you're playing against, but many times it's against yourself. And that's a lot of what I experience with my experience in tennis, and even with my experience with running, is the challenge that individual sports demand on the athlete. And especially with tennis, you know, I think tennis is one of the most difficult sports to play because of all the different aspects and all the different components that are needed to play tennis. Not only the physical aspects and the mental aspects, but, you know, you have the strategy that's involved with it. You have to deal with the pressure that comes with being by yourself on the side of the court, and the score is super tight. And, you know, with that pressure, it's about maintaining composure and being calm under the pressure. And so that's really what I love a lot about tennis, is that it requires so much. It's a very holistic sport in that sense. And running can be similar to that too. You know, I love running for many of the same reasons that I like tennis, in that it's very physically demanding, of course, but also has this strong mental aspect to it. And again, like, the competition is in many cases against yourself. And really, how is this sport calling something more out of me? How is the sport calling something more out of me? And I think it's such a great point that Geoffrey made, that the extent to which we experience the most being drawn out of us is when we're coming against the greatest competition, when we're coming against those competitors who are as good as we are or better. Yeah. If they're significantly worse than we are in their competition, you're just kind of like, all right, whatever, I'm just going to play around, blah, 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 blah.
But in a way, you try to actually make it into some kind of competition by messing around.
Yeah, you try, but it's like it's not the same.
You start playing eyes closed. You start playing with your left hand.
You try to just fool around and play around.
You got to hit spin, you know.
But again, I think that's like such a incredible connection that can be made between sports and the spiritual life. Yeah. Like, the spiritual life is such an adventure. Following the Lord is following the Lord is never boring. Yeah. You know, and that's something that I discovered pretty quickly, like when I started to get into my relationship with God, is I'm never bored following the Lord, because the Lord is always calling me to something greater. He's always bringing something out of me and demanding more trust and faith in Him. And it's because I'm coming against that greatest competition of my own sin, my own sinfulness, against the evil one who is so present in this world, right? And like, that's the competition that Christians and followers of Christ are going against. And that is what makes the Christian life so adventurous and so challenging, but never boring.
Yeah.
Maybe just to add on, I think when you're talking about competition there, it's like it's drawing something out of you, and it's then making me think about these transcendental values of beauty, truth, goodness. What's the other one?
There's three.
Yeah. Beauty, truth, and goodness. Because if you're competing in a sport and at the end of it there was no beauty, there was no truth, there was no goodness, I don't know how enjoyable that game would have been. Like, if you compete and you lie and you cheat your way to win, it's like you win the game, but it wasn't. You kind of feel bad after that. Or if you compete and you're just mad at your teammates and you're cursing and maybe you still win the game, but it's like you leave that game feeling like, man, what was I doing? So I think the competition in itself, I don't know if it's the end point, but I think it's something that can lead us into a greater beauty when you see that amazing play that happens. Or truth of honesty and sportsmanship. And I mean, you see this in, I was watching some marathon race, these top runners, and this guy was about to break some record, and he saw another guy go down by the finish line, and instead of himself running past him, and two other guys ran past this guy to get their PRs, but this guy, he forewent his PR, his personal record, to help this guy cross the finish line.
Yeah,
and then beautiful. That goes on to become this viral video, and you watch that and you're like, okay, it would have been cool if he got his best time, but he went outside of himself even more. He went past the competition in search of truth, in search of that goodness, the beauty, which sport shows us that at the end of the day, the competition leads us somewhere, but it's not the end in itself.
Yeah,
and I think something so much further.
So much more, right? And I think like both of you guys were sharing, even in the I think for me, competition, I see it as becoming a better version of yourself each time, and that's where it draws you out of that deeper potential for me. And I think that's what in the Christian living, that's what we're trying to doing every day, trying to be better. And sometimes we can get mad at ourselves for not being better. Sometimes we are better and we're joyful about it. But I think that's what, for me, when I was thinking about competition, it's being a better version of yourself. And the Lord calls us to be better. The Lord calls us always for more, like you guys were sharing. And so I think, for me, for sure, that competition is like, I wouldn't say, we shouldn't stifle our competition. Maybe we can temper it, the way we react to competition a little bit. But speaking to myself, but I would say competition is a good thing. So thanks for sharing that, guys. And then I guess since you guys have played so much and different tournaments as well, the one thing I wanted to ask was like how you deal with failures and how you kind of approach failures. Because it's inevitable in sport. You've playing a sport, whether it's team sport or individual sport, we've all faced failures. And, whether you're the greatest athlete or playing at whatever level, failure is not easy. And it's hard to take in. So how do you kind of guys see failures and go about it?
Yeah, I would say for me, I've had my great share of failures when it comes to sports for sure. And, I'm just thinking about my experience with tennis, especially. I love tennis, but I also get incredibly frustrated playing tennis. And I think that a lot of that plays with my competitiveness, my desire of wanting to win and to get points and things like that. But like when it comes to tennis, one thing that I learned when it comes to tennis is that you have to go point by point. You have to go 1 point at a time. You cannot let one missed shot determine the rest of the game for you. Wow. And if you focus too much on that one shot, it will determine the rest of the game for you. Wow. And so what I learned playing tennis, and
that's such a great analogy,
so much.
Bro. Yeah.
I mean, it required a lot of learning, especially in like my early stages of tennis when I just got so frustrated and missing these easy shots that I know I should have been hitting, and I spike it into the net, or I hit this terrible shot that I know I should have made. Like, it can be so easy to be so fixated and so focused on the fact that I missed that shot. But what I learned is that I need to move past it. I see that I made that mistake. I see that I failed in making that shot. Okay, let's move to the next point now. Let's go to the next point. Let's not let that point determine this point right here in this present moment, and especially not let it affect me later on in the game. Yeah. And so it's all about going point by point by point, and that's really what the Christian life is all about, going one day at a time, one moment at a time, knowing that it's super easy to get discouraged by our sin, right? But to know that the Lord in his mercy is so eager to forgive us. And we need to forgive ourselves too when we fall into our own sins and our own failures, and we will. Yeah. Just like when you play tennis, you're not going to play a perfect match where you make every single shot. You're going to miss shots. But the importance of perseverance, the importance of, just moving forward, just to continue going. And I think there's something such a connection there.
Yeah, there's so much stuff in there. Like, it reminded me of the sacrament of the present moment, right? Like always staying in the moment and really like not allowing your highs or your lows to kind of define you and the decision that you'll make moving forward, right? And so I think so that, but there's so many virtues as well. I think when you practice this sacrament of present moment, because then it like you, in a way, you're developing a discipline, right? Like, this is the moment, and then from this I'll move on to the next. And so there's so much beauty to that.
It's not to say that you don't learn from your mistakes, of course, as well. Like you see your failures, you see the things that you did, and you know where you messed up. Yeah. And you don't forget that, right? Like you recognize it and you acknowledge it. Mm-hmm. And then you take it with you to the next point, but you forget about the negative parts that come with it, I think. Yeah. And you learn from them. You learn from the mistakes, you learn from the failures.
Which is difficult because you're kind of it can stay in the back of your mind, like, I can't believe I missed that shot.
Yeah.
I can't believe I missed that shot. But like you're saying, the more you hold on to that, it doesn't help you in any kind of way because you can't go back.
No,
you can't
exactly.
Change it.
Point's over.
You have to be able to move on and have that forgetfulness that isn't a forgetfulness of, oh, this will magically, I'll get better at this. There's a remembrance, okay, when I finish this game, I'm going to practice that shot.
Yeah.
Because I know that's going to come again. But there has to be some kind of a forgetfulness or joy. And you see it in some players when they play where they make a mistake and they're still smiling.
Yeah.
Because they're not weighed down by that mistake. And they get back and they do the next play. I mean, in all these sports, baseball, a player that gets 3 hits out of 10 hits, they get out 7 times. That player will go on to be in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Basketball, if you miss half of your shots and make the other half, you're going to be an amazing player.
Yeah,
exactly.
So all these sports, like, there's an expectation that you will fail.
Yeah.
And you really have to just acknowledge that and accept that in humility that every shot's not going to be perfect. And if you think every shot's going to be perfect, you're just going to be disappointed.
You're going to be disappointed, yeah.
Because you always kind of play to the level of how much you've practiced. It's very rare that you're going to consistently perform outside of that level.
Yeah.
If you're a golfer and in 10 shots, you hit 5 average shots, 2 good shots, 2 bad shots, 1 amazing shot, 1 terrible, I think that's 11 shots. You can't expect you're going to be hitting the perfect shot every time.
Yeah.
You're going to be hitting the average shot most of the time.
Yeah.
And then when the game ends, you got to go practice, pushing your average a little bit higher.
Yeah.
So sports is very humiliating.
It's humility, yeah.
Yeah.
Humility.
It's a great point, right? On humility.
It involves so much humility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Courage and humility.
Yeah.
Really like the 2 things that come out to me
the understanding that we as a human person, we have our weaknesses. We're not, and in that weakness is actually a place to turn to God, right?
Exactly.
And then I think that's the beauty of it, that I think sports can bring out that humility of, okay, this happened to me and I reacted this way, or this happened. But I think those are precisely the moments we're called to like turn to God and, allow God to speak to us. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think sport, too, it's that area of control, because so much the beauty of sport is when you're actually able to control the ball, make it go where you want it to. So then we love that so much, but then recognizing at the end of the day, my control is limited. And where that ball is going to go, I don't exactly know. I'm going to practice and try and push it in that direction. Tennis, I want to hit it in that corner.
Yeah.
Soccer, I want to hit it that direction. And when that happens, when we align and it comes together, it's the most beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But when it doesn't, it's the most frustrating thing.
Yeah.
Which leads us back to that. Okay, I have a desire for control, not in the sense of it has to go my way, but I want to be able to have an effect on things, guide things in a certain way, impress my gifts on this situation. But at the same time, I'm not God.
Not perfect.
I am not perfect.
That's right.
I cannot make this go where I want it to go.
Yeah.
And I have to understand that and remember that.
And grow in that, yeah.
But the feeling of hitting a perfect shot, whether it's tennis or golf or soccer.
What is that?
That's
what keeps it going.
Because you hit that and you're like, oh man, I want this again. And that's what I think makes us keep going in a way, is like we can see the potential we're called to. We can see the potential that we're made to be, and we experience that, I think, in that moment of that perfect shot. But I think at the same time we realize, we want to try and replicate it each time, and that's what we're striving for, right?
And I think when we try and replicate it, we fail.
Because somehow the failure keeps us going more.
Somehow that
cycle.
Somehow that perfect shot, whether it's golf or tennis, soccer, whatever it is, you almost aren't thinking I'm gonna hit the perfect shot. You just do it, and it happens, and you're like, wow, that was like the most amazing thing ever.
Yeah,
it's that taste of, now if I could just do this, but then we say, oh, if I could just do this every single time. We kind of try and like
that's true,
force that into a box instead of just like appreciate it. And
and just seeing it as a gift. Yeah, that's true. That's a great analogy. I do want to ask you guys this question too, because having played with you guys and known you pretty close as well, I've seen one like amazing characteristic that I really admire is the mentality that you guys have, and like there is this in both of you guys, there's this mentality of I want to keep going and I want to keep trying. So versus, and I've been thinking about this like with like what makes Kobe Kobe or what makes Michael Jordan Michael Jordan. Many times it's a mentality. They're like relentless at keeping on going versus others, or not others, versus in general, like you guys don't give up. What kind of drives that mentality for you guys to like keep striving forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, what keeps me going, I think a lot of the stuff that we just have been talking about on this podcast all play into it. Like the failures, the joys that come with the sport, the competition aspect of it, the unity of bringing so many people together, the social aspect of sports, sport bringing out the best of you. Like all this, it forms such a incredibly strong experience.
Yeah.
You know?
Is it like you've experienced the beauty and of sport and you want more of that? Is that kind of what you want to?
Yeah, I think that's
part of it.
I think it's like any little kid. Like any little kid, when they play a game that they really like playing,
they don't want to stop.
Playing a game that they really enjoy. Like even if they lose it, they're like, all right, I need to play this again. Like I really like this game. There's something that caught my attention about it and whatnot. So like they keep coming back to it. So in my mind, I'm just like, oh, I'm a little kid. Like,
yeah, you're playing.
I love this sport. Let me play this game again.
Playing it for the love of the game,
kind of
right?
Like going back to playing.
Yeah,
sports as play.
Yeah, so. Playing it for the love of the game, and I think that's where the word amateur also comes from, right? Like playing it for the love.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this from when I was a kid and starting to play. I actually hated sports. Oh, wow. When I was 5, I was put on the soccer team. My dad loved sports, so he had us playing every kind of sport, at least trying it. So yeah, I think for me, what kept me going a lot in sports and wanting to do better, and I think about it from when I was a kid, because at first I did not like sports. I didn't want to play, and I was on a soccer team at age 5, and I would literally sit on the bench, and they'd be like, all right, do you want to play? And I would say no, and I would just be in the corner crying. I don't want to go in the game. And it was, finally my dad just said, just try, just go in there. And so I got in the game, and literally that game, like I was standing in the corner, somebody kicked the ball, like it hit off of my leg and it went in the goal. And like we ended up like tying the game, and everyone came and like cheered around me. And I didn't even know what happened. I didn't even shoot the ball. Somebody kicked and it just hit off of me and it went in the goal. I thought I was the best player after that. So then the next season I came back and I was like so into it. So it was like so many coaches, so many people like my dad who they believed and they saw a potential in me. I think as a kid, that was something that really kept me going, was like having coaches that said, you can do it. Yeah. I believe in you. You can do it. And all throughout then middle school, high school, having these coaches, especially my dad also, who would go out and play with me in the yard, throwing pitches and just saying, all right, try one more. That's one thing that definitely kept me going. I think when you get older, though, like now it's our age and 20s, 30s, it's kind of like you don't really have too many people that are telling you, Anthony, I really believe you're going to become a better soccer player. Or Dylan, just keep running, man. You got this. Like we kind of, it can be easy to lose some of that childlikeness of
sport,
of that person that's believing in you, which
the encouragement.
I mean, we know we have that in faith. Okay, the Lord is there. He's encouraging us. He's believing in us, and we can go back to that. But I think especially as a kid, it can be a very tangible experience of being on a team, having a coach who believed in you, who says you can do this, and then you reach that, and there's a joy in that. Okay, I can make it to the next level.
Yeah. No, I think I mean, I think in one of our last episodes we were talking about the importance of fatherhood and how the father's gaze on the child really raises the dignity of the child, right? In a way, and I think the Father in heaven who looks at us brings out the full dignity of who we are too. So as you're sharing that, I think I thought of that too. But I guess, in a way you guys answered, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to too, but you guys answered why you play the game, but you guys really didn't answer why you keep striving to be better. Have you guys ever thought about that? Of like, because you guys are like, I want to be better. I want to you shared like why you want to play the game and why you love it so much. Yeah. But have you thought about like why do you want to like be better even now?
Okay, yeah. I can speak a little bit into that. Like I think this has been a continual process in my own life, being an athlete, and a continual place of growth for me. It's like asking that question, okay, why am I waking up this day and running 6-7 miles or whatever? And like,
exactly.
Or like, why am I so desirous of like winning this match or whatnot? Like, it's been a growth opportunity for me of like, okay, am I just doing this for selfish reasons? Like just to bring more attention to myself, or just to like satisfy some desire that can only be met by the Lord, obviously. Like, okay, why am I pursuing this sport? Why am I striving to want to be better? And so I would say for me, like for me, it's like a growth, just continual growth in that way of just making sure that I'm always keeping humility at the center of it all, right? That I'm not approaching this sport in any sort of prideful way whatsoever to bring more attention to myself, which is an incredibly difficult challenge, I think, when you look at the way that sports has an influence on the culture and the competition that is involved with it, like making sports about oneself only, to put more attention on you. But this is where the Lord has continued to work in my life, and where he's continued to purify these desires that I have to continue to pursue athletics. And I think for me, like coming to a greater awareness and a greater acknowledgement and a greater thankfulness for the gifts and the talents that I've received in being athletic, and knowing that that comes from the Lord.
Wow.
Like that comes from the Lord, and that the Lord has given these athletic abilities and talents to me so that I can enjoy them myself, but not just for that. He's done it. He's given me all this to glorify his name, to glorify him, right? And so for me, that's something that I'm kind of taking away with me now progressively and growing in. Is like, as I'm playing sports, as I'm growing in my athletic abilities and whatnot, like how is sports a means of evangelization for other people? How are people experiencing the love and the joy that I'm receiving from playing this sport, but they're also coming to the awareness and the recognition that this is a gift from God, and the joy that I'm experiencing is rooted in love, the love of the sport, but that joy is a gift.
Yeah.
Joy is a gift. And
yeah, I think in a way, like, you know, as you're saying that, like, it's telling me like you've received what you've experienced from sport as a gift, and in a way you now have this responsibility that, okay, if God has given me as a gift, I have a responsibility to nurture this gift, to cultivate it, to make it better. And
exactly.
So, and yeah, that's such a beautiful analogy. Yeah. So
I would also just add real quickly is like, I think that's what there's such a beauty in what it means to be a Christian athlete. You know, what it means to be an athlete playing for a sports team, but who also is deeply rooted in their faith.
Yeah.
And so their faith is not distant or separate from their athletics. Their faith penetrates every single aspect of their life, including their athletics. And so again, like what it means to be a healthy competitor, what it means to compete against others in a way that is encouraging human dignity, that is encouraging virtue, right, is so critical for the Christian athlete, you know, to always keep that in the focus, especially when it comes to like, you know, heavy competition against people and heated situations. Okay. Like, how am I being called to be a respectful athlete in this situation? How am I called to exercise humility, temperance, you know? So how sports really is not only physical and it's not only mental, but it also is deeply spiritual. So.
Yeah. No, I think you've touched on a great point of how our witness in sports plays such a key role, you know, and you know, how that can be a means of bringing Christ to others as well. But at the same time, I don't think we need to like not be ourselves too. I'm saying like we don't need to like act like one of the things I've loved about seminary formation as well is like the focus on human formation and how you're becoming more of yourself in a way and you're being free. And so I think like not hiding that competition that you have, a healthy competition, not hiding the joy that you celebrate, it's not like a numbing down. So I think that beauty of our witness in sports can be a means of evangelization. Geoffrey, any thoughts on that? Because he's played a lot of, pro leagues and semi-pro leagues, not pro leagues, semi-pro leagues, semi-pro leagues here around. And, most of the teammates are really not, I don't know, I presume they're not practicing Christians or, we don't even know many times what religion they're from. So any thoughts on our witness as a means of evangelization?
Yeah, I think, sometimes you set out on something that you just really desire. And sometimes you don't even know how you're evangelizing through sport. An experience of this was a few of us around here, we ran this marathon back in 2021 in Clearwater, Florida. And it was just something that had been on my heart. Like, okay, I really want to run a marathon to grow in perseverance and patience, endurance. So I told a few people, then they said, hey, we also want to do this. And the next thing you know, we had a whole group of like 20 of us going to run this race. And so we all just happened to be wearing these T-shirts that had a Bible verse on the back. And us going and running in the race, there were so many people commenting on it and saying, hey, we love that verse, praise God, God is good. And we're just like, oh, nice.
Yeah.
And then we went to this, church for Mass, and there's a group of like 25 of us, and so they see us and they're like, okay. And it's like a predominantly Indian group in this like Vietnamese parish, and they're like, all right, like, who are you guys? So they had someone come up and just explain like who our group is. And then the pastor afterwards was like talking to us, and he's like, man, what you guys are doing with this kind of program is like amazing. Wow. We want our youth to do this kind of thing. And he gave us some gift card, and then he was asking about World Youth Day and whether they can come with us. And, a few of us were laughing, like this wasn't like a program, we just wanted to run a marathon.
Wow.
We just wanted to use our bodies and strive for something that seems impossible. Like running a marathon, it seems impossible, but we want to set out on the impossible. And really, we had no plan of evangelization. We weren't saying, okay, how can we evangelize? All right, let's sign up for this marathon, and then we're going to go do training for 4 months, waking up at 5 a.m. and running no, none of that. We're going to get it, It was just, we want to do this race. And then through that, there was a natural joy of us running. And people could see that joy of the three of us who did the marathon running together, stride by stride, with the Lord's name on our back.
Wow.
And for me, that was a beautiful experience of evangelization, because you're witnessing not through just preaching and proclaiming. Those are beautiful things, but witnessing through, this is a group of brothers and sisters that want to strive for something, and we're doing it with the Lord. And that weekend was a weekend of fellowship, prayer, running. Yeah. But it really kind of opened my eyes to evangelization as, maybe I don't have to, start a Catholic sports league or have a Catholic soccer game. Like, maybe, I can just go play as a Catholic and try to witness that.
Yeah, and in a way, that's probably like our calling is to, like, for especially for the laity, is to go out into the secular world and preach the gospel there, rather than trying to tie it back in. So I think that's a beautiful example. And so we're almost running out of time, guys. I know we had a lot more that we wanted to talk about, but we touched about some of the virtues that we develop in sports. We talked about humility, courage, perseverance in a way. I do want to talk about one last aspect, is the aspect of sacrifice. Yeah. And how you guys see sacrifice and sports, and during different trainings, or as you're prepping, or even during the race itself, how do you guys kind of see sacrifice?
I think for me personally, I learned the beauty and the importance of sacrifice at a very young age when I was first getting into sports, actually really through the example of my parents. Because really the first sport that I really kind of committed to, and I was very much like disciplined in and just, spent a lot of time and energy towards, was ice hockey. I played ice hockey for 6-7 years. And yeah, if any of you listeners know what it's like to play ice hockey, especially on a travel team, it requires a lot of sacrifice. And I learned sacrifice from my parents because they would be the ones waking up, at 3:30, 4 in the morning to drive me to the ice rink for a super early morning practice or a super early game, because that was the only time that the ice was open. The ice rink was open during that day. It was super, super early in the morning. So my parents would sacrifice their sleep to drive me to the ice rink. Not to mention how expensive ice hockey can be. Like, playing for a travel team can be expensive, and all the gear and the equipment that's needed to play ice hockey can be expensive. So I would say from a very early age, I learned the beauty of sacrifice through my parents. And obviously, like, sacrifice is deeply rooted in love, right? You're only going to sacrifice yourself. You're only going to sacrifice for that which you love. And, that's what we can see in sports, that the athletes who love the sport more are going to sacrifice more.
Yeah.
They're going to be the ones that are waking up earlier to get the practice in. They're going to be the ones staying afterwards to get some extra reps in, get some extra shots, whatever it is. They're going to be the ones that are going to sacrifice more because they love the sport more.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, the connection with the spiritual life, the connection that's present there. Like, I'm going to sacrifice more for the Lord because I love the Lord, and I love the Lord so deeply, and I have recognized the incredible love he has for me and sacrificing himself for my sins, for my salvation. Like, I'm going to reciprocate that love back to him, and I'm going to sacrifice everything that I have, everything that I am to the Lord for his greater glory.
Yeah. And I think, sacrificing yourself for others too. And, that in Vatican II, we read, like, man finds himself by being a sincere gift of himself towards others. That's how, in a way, the fullness of who we are called to be is in that sacrificing. The way we love others is by sacrificing ourselves for them. Geoffrey, any thoughts on sacrifice in sports?
No, I thought Dylan's examples and what he was saying there was really beautiful. I don't have too much more to add on. So much of sport is also experiences of passing, of giving up to another, which you call the assist, or maybe it's the assist to the assist. Whenever you look at the newspaper, the guy who got the assist, he'll never be there, Wow. It's going to be the person that scored the goal.
Yeah.
It's rarely that person that made the pass or the defender that blocked the thing that then got there.
Yeah.
But there's a sacrifice in giving up a good for a greater good.
Yeah.
What you see in sports all the time. Someone has an open shot, but somebody else is wide open. So you pass that ball to them because you realize that the glory, it's not about my glory, and it's not even about their glory.
It's about
the team's glory,
Yeah.
So you're willing to give up that pass.
Yeah. That's a great analogy, right? Like, it's not about you in a way. It's about the other person, really. And I think that's such a beautiful analogy. And even in our lives today, like, when we play, I think there's small sacrifices we all make, because in a way, like you're saying, okay, I'm sacrificing maybe not, resting or doing nothing in my room to go and play the sport or to go and help out others. So I think even today there's so many beautiful analogies with sacrifice too. Yeah, guys, thank you so much. I think there's so much more that I could talk to you guys and cover.
We're gonna need a part 2 for this one,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah, but I really do feel there is a deep connection between sports and spirituality.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe like you guys can share too, but like, have you thought about this? Like, when athletes, when they either like win or lose, the first thing they do is look up. Like, I've always thought about that. Like, they might not even be like spiritual or practicing people, but like, I don't know. I think the highs and lows of sports, it brings out the deepest human person. That the only place we can bring that all to is up to God. So I don't know. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us and being with us this episode. It's such a joy talking to you guys.
Yeah, it was a fun time. Thanks
Cheers,
for having
mates.
us.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I think maybe the next part 2 will be we'll be playing tennis, and
we'll be doing the podcast on a tennis court, right?
Playing golf together. Everyone's mic'd up.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd really see our real, real thoughts towards sports.
Exactly. We'll be me and Jeff. Anthony, you can join too. We'll run a marathon. We'll do the podcast with little mics put on our shirts.
Oh, bro, GoPro. That'll be great.
Get a GoPro in the studio.
Here we are, mile 13.
Yeah.
Can't feel my legs.
Glory to God.
Glory to God. It's sacrifice, guys.
Yeah,
sacrifice.
Right. Us all in sacrifice.
All right. Thank you so much, Dylan. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the In Spirit podcast. In Spirit is an initiative of Amoris Christi, an apostolate dedicated to lay spiritual formation. For more information and to keep up to date, you can visit our website at amorischristi.org and follow us on social media.